We're here with Nicole Young today on Women in Photography, and we're just really excited to have you with us today. Nicole is a very accomplished food photographer. She does landscapes. She's written several books, and I'll let her talk a little bit more about that as well. But let's talk about you and tell everybody, who was Nicole Young, what do you do, and how did you get started in food photography?
Sure. Well, I started doing photography back in high school. I think a lot of people can relate to that with just finding a passion for something. But at that time, I didn't think that it would be something I could actually monetize and actually make money from. So I chose to go a different direction. And when about a year out of high school, I joined the military. So I was in the Navy for a total of 8.5 years. And about 6 years into that, I discovered microstock. And I really wanted to kind of reignite my passion for photography in general. And I needed a focus. So I thought, I'll do this because it gives a community of people. And it gives me something to, kind of a reason to create photographs. So I started doing that and learned that I'm actually making money from this, which was kind of a surprise. I didn't do it with the intention of making it a career and actually becoming a full-time photographer. So I did that, and I decided to separate from the military and continue my photography career, and it's really just kind of got, just grown ever since then. I've gone from doing stock photography to now I do a lot of food photography and landscapes, and I do a lot of books, and I write articles and teach. So it's that's kind of the in a nutshell version of how I became what I do today, starting from back when I was in the Navy.
That's great.
Yeah.
To be able to make money in stock photography these days, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
That's great.
I feel really blessed that I get to basically create any photograph I want, and the best part is that people actually license them. And
Right.
You can make any photograph, but not necessarily people aren't necessarily going to want to buy them. But I feel really blessed that was a way for me to kind of get into doing something that I'm 100% passionate about.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, Nicole, what inspires you? Let's just talk about landscapes for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
When you're out shooting landscapes, are there certain places you love to shoot? I know you just came from Oregon, did some traveling. You've lived all over the world. Tell us a little bit about that and your inspiration and just living in different places, how that's changed you.
Well, I would say that the landscape photography is kind of a new thing for me because I've only been doing it the last few years seriously. And the reason I got so inspired to create landscapes was because it was just a filter, really. I got a 10-stop neutral density filter, which cuts out the light from your lens, so you're able to create really long exposures. And the thing prior to that kind of bored me with landscapes was that they were just there. They didn't move, they just stood still. And with this new filter, I was able to photograph running water and blur it and give that nice cotton candy fuzz, and even clouds, And there's so many other uses for these filters. And that was kind of the step for me I needed to take to say, wow, wait, all landscapes are beautiful. I don't just need to photograph running water. But while I lived in Seattle. Before I lived in Japan, Hawaii while I was in the military, and after that it was California, Utah, Seattle, Portland, and then here. So I've kind of traveled all over the place. But while I was living in Portland particularly, there's the Columbia River Gorge and other parks out there that have some amazing waterscapes, and just going out to the ocean out there too. It's just so beautiful out there. So I really fell in love with the area. I really fell in love with landscape photography at that time. Before that, actually, kind of to backtrack, when I was living in Utah, I knew a lot of other stock photographers there, and I did a lot of people photography with stock. When I moved to Seattle, though, I moved there I just kind of felt like moving, I was single and just kind of do my own thing and wanted to try something new. So I moved to Seattle and kind of lived the city life for a little while, but I didn't really know many people. So I fell deeper into food photography. It kind of sounds like a bad thing, but it was a really good thing. And because, I don't need anyone to do anything for me. I'm very self-sufficient with my food images. So I was able to just basically create everything from my own home, which is why I have so many food photographs and why I do it so much more now.
That's great. Wonderful. Well, let's take a look at some of your images.
Sure.
And I know that we've got a few food images to show and also a few landscapes. And then we'll talk about your dog, Kodak.
Yeah, great.
So let's go ahead and start and take a look at
Sure.
This particular image here. Can you tell us a little bit about your thought process behind food photography and maybe a tip that you can think of?
Sure. Well, one of the things, these photographs that we're sharing here are very representative of my style. I'm very very bright. The food photos I create are very bright and colorful. This image is just a very simple photograph. It's just oatmeal. There's really nothing elaborate about it. The one thing I did here was, instead of trying to go with opposite colors in terms of, like, because I added the blueberries, I went with a nice blue background to go with that, which in a way is complementary to the color of the oatmeal, because the oatmeal is kind of a yellowish brown color, which can be very boring and ugly if you don't photograph it correctly. I do a lot of backlighting with my lighting style. I use diffused window light for most everything that I do, and I just fill everything in with really simple white foam board. You can get it for like $1 at a craft store. I have a lot of these setups on my website, and I do share a lot of my behind the scenes with my food images. I like to share and teach other people on how to create beautiful things like this. Another thing I really try to do, and you'll see this in almost all of my food images, is I was trying, and that other photo actually, the blueberry photo, was a very good example of it. I create a lot of space around every element in my scene. I don't like things to overlap and kind of cross over. So you're going to see like a little buffer between things, and that's very intentional. I do everything on a tripod. I would say most everything. If I do overhead things, which isn't very often, I'm standing up and photographing it. But because I use window light, the light is really, it's not very powerful. So I need to have longer exposures for these types of images. So I'm on a tripod, and I'm very deliberate. I use live view when I'm placing everything. So I'm setting something and I'm looking back and seeing how it actually looks on the back of the LCD. So. And here's this is a very bruschetta, I guess, image. Another example of where all of the images, all of the elements in the scene are standing on their own, and there's really nothing that's crisscrossing or overlapping, other than maybe setting it on top of the napkin, I guess is the only example. But I also work in odd numbers. I try to do a lot of like threes. The 3 blueberries in the front is very intentional, that I put 3 there and I place them that way almost, and you can see they're kind of and some of this I'm kind of looking at and over analyzing it, but it looks good the way that the blueberries on the bottom there are almost, one of them is kind of off centered to the left third line if you put those other 2 on a plane, if that makes any sense. So I'm over analyzing what I do, and a lot of it I just kind of do naturally while I'm creating it, but there is a lot of rhyme and reason to why I have things set in my scene a certain way. And I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, now let's go ahead and transition over to landscapes,
Sure.
which is very much different.
Yeah, my landscapes are very different. A lot of my stuff is very cleanly processed, so there's a lot of parallels in terms of post-processing. This is an HDR photograph, which when I do my HDR images, I try to make them as natural as possible, but still looking, like there is more to it than just a straight, simple photograph. This is actually a good example of when you see something on the side of the road, to stop and photograph it, because I was driving back from a state park, from Silver Falls State Park in Portland. I'm sorry, not Portland, in Oregon. Okay. And it was the sun was setting, and I was with my friend, and we really wanted to photograph the sunset, but we didn't. We weren't in a good location. So while we were driving back, we found a few places to stop, and this was one of them. So. Okay, great. And now this is along the Oregon coast. I think it's now Pacific City, and just a very good example of why I love landscapes. You have the water I was able to blur by using a long exposure with a neutral density filter.
Beautiful.
Another thing I like to do is travel, and this doesn't really look like a travel photograph, but it was photographed. I photographed this in Australia. And I was trying to photograph the sunrise, so I was up really early, but the sunrise was really uninspiring. It was just boring, and so I had this big bunch of lavender right in front of me, and this is like just off of my my hotel room. It was like right on the patio there, and there were these bees just buzzing around, and it was just like kind of that perfect moment. So I just set my camera down, and I was really patient. I just took photo after photo after photo, and this is actually a composite. The only thing that's composited in there is that little bright bee in the background, because I wanted that perfect one right on that foreground piece of lavender, and then I saw that other one in another frame, and I was like, oh, that'd be a nice little background element. So I just kind of used Photoshop masking and stuck it in there.
That's great.
Yeah. And this is more travel. I love walking through markets. This was in Cambodia, and I took my macro lens, my 100 macro, and just walked through and looked for interesting compositions and just things that are close up. And it's like a photo of dead fish, but there's something about it that I absolutely love. The colors and just the framing. It's very playful, but I don't know, it's very real.
Yes.
And I do enjoy macro photography. This is just, I don't do a lot of focus stacking. I try it sometimes, but this was just, I really enjoy that shallow depth of field. And I played around with this image and I added some texture to it and just did some fun processing with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and my dog Kodak.
Yes, wonderful dog.
Yes, he's such a happy dog, and he's kind of my way to get away from photography in a way, which isn't always a bad thing, to kind of step away from what you're doing, because you can get really tunnel vision if you focus on one thing for too long. And so this is the only time that, when I lived in Portland, there was this really wonderful dog park, and it was acres and acres of just like trails that you could walk on. So I would take him there, and it was his favorite place to go, and you kind of see, he almost looks like he's smiling. And so the last trip before we moved out to the Bay Area was, I actually brought my camera with me and took some pictures of him. So that was the result of that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you for sharing those images with us.
Sure.
Let's talk about women in photography specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any challenges that you have come across being a woman and shooting stock or food photography, or has it been an advantage to you, an advantage?
I actually feel that I've never really had any struggles being a woman photographer. I think the only time I've ever felt it is if I would go to like a old school camera store and I'm not taken seriously because I just don't look like I could be a professional. I'm not exactly sure. I just kind of got that vibe. But other than that, I've had only good experiences as a female photographer. I think that in some ways we do have an advantage because we're maybe not as intimidating, and so being able to photograph people or asking people, hey, can I photograph you? It's people aren't gonna be like, well, you're scary, or like other women aren't gonna necessarily be as intimidated if I wanted to invite them to do a photo session with me. And in terms of food photography, I would almost say that the food photography community that I'm familiar with is the majority is women. So it's almost like a flop. You see a lot of I don't know why photography is considered a men's profession. I don't think it is anymore, but I think it used to really be, what is it? We don't have to be really strong to carry a camera around, and there's so much artistic,
Right.
There's a lot of, it's a balance though. It's a balance between artistic and technical. So maybe the technical scares some people away that aren't really drawn towards that. But there are a lot of women photographers out there that are just amazing, and I think it's great to be able to see through women's eyes and see the difference between how different men photograph things versus women, and there definitely is a difference.
Yeah, and I've noticed over 8 years or so that more and more women are getting into photography, and even in workshops I've seen a lot more women being involved as well.
Yeah.
So, well, let's talk about if you could pick a woman photographer, and there's a lot of very inspirational ones out there, but pick one of your favorites, and maybe
Sure.
you could share with us why you are inspired by her.
The person that I would say is truly inspiring to me is a good friend of mine. Her name's Renee Keith, and she lives in Utah. She does stock photography as well, but her images are very conceptual and very designed. They're like paintings. She does, I think I know her pretty well, and I've seen her work, and I think one of the things that inspires me is because I've seen the process, and what she does. And she doesn't just create things to make them look good. I mean, there's a lot of heart and soul in her images. She does a lot of her own body painting and makeup and props that she builds that people wear, and the ideas and the concepts behind them, and they're just things that I would never even think of, and it's also stuff that's outside of my style of photography, and I think I'm drawn towards that because it's easy to get, like I said earlier, it's easy to get tunnel vision in photography, and it's also easy to get tunnel vision in your own type of photography.
Right.
So it's good to step outside of that and see things that maybe you wish you could photograph or you want to try and photograph. And so her work's just absolutely beautiful.
Great.
And I really enjoy looking at it and watching her process behind it.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing her with us.
Sure.
That's great.
Yeah.
Any upcoming projects that we should know about? Any new books, or do you want to share with us?
Sure, I have a lot of things
Yes,
on the horizon. I'm currently working on an ebook for Peach Fit on travel photography, and after that, I'm going to be doing one of my own ebooks. I've self-published before, and so I have another one that I'm going to be writing, and it's going to be on landscape photography and mostly in I'm calling it a light and process landscape photography, and it's actually going to be the start of a series of ebooks on the same kind of the same template, the same style and design, where I'm going to be discussing the photographs and how I created it, why I created it, and then into the technical things such as the gear that I used, and also the post-processing, all of the steps to the post-processing. So that's one, and then I have at least one more book coming along with Peach Pit, a print book that I'll be writing, and so that'll be later in the year. There'll be more on that.
That's great. And I know you've written articles for photo magazines.
I do, yes. I write.
Busy.
I write a lot. I create video content, so I'm constantly creating, and I think as a photographer, and we're more than just photographers. We like to create, and I do things on the side. Like I take pottery classes, because part of it is I could create things for my food photography, but the other part is just to kind of step away from the pixels and the computer, and to do something that has nothing to do with technology, and other than the wheel spinning around. It's very hands-on and messy, and I really enjoy that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today on Women in Photography. Everyone, please join and go to our website. Go ahead and tell us, I know you've got a blog site as well,
I do.
Blog, and you're on G+. So where can they find you?
Well, on Google+, you can find me at the plus.google.com, and then plus Nicolesy. It's NICOLESY. And I have my website is also under the same. It's nicolesy.com. And from any of those websites, you can find me everywhere else that you need to.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank
Laura.
you.